Let's bring in now live in the studio. I'm joined by the Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, the new Premier, who's been at the Press Club today. Thanks for your time. We're seeing maybe the Malinauskas effect, I'm not sure, but Boothby, according to a poll today in the federal seat of Boothby, Labor's ahead 57 to 43, even ahead in Sturt, which is Christopher Pyne's old seat. Are you optimistic for Albanese's chances ahead of the federal election down there?
I am, Kieran, but I say that with a great degree of trepidation. It wouldn't be the first occasion that Labor in South Australia has looked to Boothby as a potential pick up in the federal election and then fallen short. But if I'm honest, it's the strongest I've felt about our chances ever. Boothby has often been described as a mirage in the desert for federal Labor, that we never quite get there. But certainly the feeling on the ground at the moment, Kieran, is that there's a sense of optimism about the future of the nation, but also a sense that we've got this extraordinary opportunity post-COVID. And they want to see a leader with a plan and an ambition to capture that opportunity. And there's only one party at the moment that's presenting that, and it's federal Labor.
It seems you were pretty honest at the Press Club today, saying that politicians really can't change cost of living problems, it costs, but you can in terms of wages. But it's all long-term, isn't it? It's not a short-term fix.
That's true, but I think the electorate want people to think long-term. I mean, households sit around, Kieran, on a regular basis and they plan their mortgages 10, 20 years in advance. They think about their kids' jobs. They think about their insurance policies. Households think long-term. And I think at the moment, particularly in this post-COVID world, they want to see the nation think long-term, particularly when it comes to cost of living. How many times, Kieran, have you heard politicians refer to reducing the price of petrol, reducing the price of groceries? And the truth is, governments don't control these things. But what governments can do is have wages and incomes policy that really does set up middle-class Australia for a more prosperous future.
The federal government's gone for at least a short-term fix on the reduction of the excise. It's not permanent, but it is 6 months. I guess it's temporary relief in that sense.
Yeah, sure. And no one's saying that's not a welcome action on behalf of the Commonwealth, but it's 6 months. So what happens in the next 6 months? Where's the long-term plan? So I think the electorate would say, well, thank you for a bit of short-term thinking. We acknowledge that makes a contribution to the household budget. But what's the long-term plan, Kieran? I mean, I ask myself, and I'm paying attention, what is Scott Morrison's plan post the pandemic? What's the Federal Liberal Party and the Coalition got planned for us in a decade's time? I don't see much evidence of that, whereas at least I see with Federal Labor talking about the big picture national questions, housing, what we see around education, training and skills, fixing Medicare. There's a serious plan there.
Fixing Medicare, I was going to ask you about that because you obviously made a great deal of health reform, the need to grapple with that as an issue. How central should Labor be making that federally in terms of their bid? Because it was obviously very successful for you in that state, in South Australia. Do you think it's something with resonance nationwide?
Yes, I do. Because we've got a growing population, an ageing population, and pressure on hospital systems is happening right around the Federation. And what we don't see enough of, in my assessment, is policy around primary health care, namely Medicare and allied health services, intersecting with the hospital system. There's often funding disputes, and those are disputes and debates that will continue into the future. But actually seeing investments in primary health care to prevent hospital admissions is in the national interest.
You spoke in your victory speech about the Syrian family that voted at your booth,
yes,
where you went to vote with your family, your wife and kids. Today you spoke about you want South Australia to punch above your weight,
yes,
in relocating refugees, as well. How many numbers are you talking about?
Well, currently we've got 13,500 places spread throughout the nation when it comes to humanitarian visa intake. Now, that's a very small number in the context of our national capacity. It's a very small number in the context of the amount of refugees we took post the Vietnam War, post World War II with displaced people. When you think about the contribution we made post Tiananmen Square, I just think there needs to be a bit more compassion and bold, ambitious leadership. Look, if we're secure and confident in our democracy as a nation, and I think as Australians we are, I think there's an appetite to help out Ukrainians, Afghanis, because we know those people would love to come to Australia.
Do you think South Australians and Australians broadly support that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Look, we've got a shortage of labour in the economy, we know as it is, but rather than just focusing on skilled migration, which potentially has the effect of flattening wages, let's focus on the humanitarian intake as well, because we know these people who do come want to build our nation and contribute to our economy in a highly productive way.
The other thing that you've called for is a ban on, or you're pushing towards, is a ban on political donations.
We're going to deliver this. Well, we're going to deliver this in South Australia. It's our policy.
Why is that?
Because I don't think Australians like seeing big money in politics. We know the US experience is politicians now spend as much time fundraising as they do campaigning, talking to voters or developing policy. And that strikes me as a system, as a democracy that's out of kilter, out of balance.
So where do the political parties get their funds from then? Is it public funding?
Public funding. And public funding already exists at most state elections, and it exists at the Commonwealth level. But I think we should be examining spending caps, that is, cap the amount of expenditure on elections, and make sure the gap between the spending cap and the public funding is so small as to negate the need for fundraising. And that means politicians might spend some time focusing on policy and focusing their time on talking to people rather than people through fundraising efforts.
I know one of your big policies at the election too on energy was hydrogen.
Yes.
Why are you so convinced? It seems that there are, like Twiggy Forrest also a convert to it. Why is it the way forward?
Well, I'm a convert as well, Kieran. But hydrogen, being a fuel of the future, is no longer a coin toss. This is a serious policy endeavour that as a nation, we've got more capacity to produce and produce cheaply in comparison to the rest of the world. The world is decarbonising. Forget the arguments about climate change. That's not of substance. What matters is the rest of the world wants clean energy. We produce a lot of it in this country through our abundant wind and solar supplies. We can turn that into hydrogen, export clean energy to the rest of the world. It's a massive economic opportunity.
How much progress can you make in your first term?
Well, we're going to build a $593 million hydrogen production facility that today, if it was built, would be the world's largest. In 4 years' time, it won't be, because there is a race on globally and we want South Australia to lead it. I think Australia should lead that effort and we'll do our part.
Premier, appreciate your time.
Thank you.